Welcome to the Conscience of Kansas radio show with Paul A. Ibbetson, a no-nonsense conservative talk show that looks at the local, state, and national issues that affect the people of Kansas. And now, here's Paul A. Ibbetson.
In the first half of the program, we're going to be speaking with David Woodard. He is the author of Why We Whisper, Restoring Our Right to Say It's Wrong. David Woodard holds the Strong Thurman Chair of Government at Clemson University, where he has taught political science since 1983. He is the author of several books, including The Conservative Tradition in America, The New Southern Politics, and the America that Ronald Reagan built. David Woodard would like to welcome you to the Conscience of Kansas radio program.
Paul, it's a pleasure to be there.
Well,
I love Kansas. We drove across it a couple of years ago going out to ski in Colorado, and it was a beautiful drive.
Oh, absolutely. Kansas, when you compare it to Colorado, you can drop a level anywhere in this state and almost get the bubble to go to the center, but you get to see a lot of the beautiful pasture lands and plains and wheat and all the beautiful things of Kansas. And, David, it's our pleasure to have you on the program. You have a very interesting book here with Why We Whisper. And I was wondering if you could tell our Conscience of Kansas listeners a little bit more about yourself and how you began and got into this book project.
Sure, Paul. Well, my co-author is Senator Jim DeMint, who is the junior senator here in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham being the senior senator. And Jim and I were just old friends who, before he ran for Congress and then for the Senate, we had been associated in politics together. And after he was elected to the Senate, I went up to see him one day, and he said, we need to write a book, because we tended to see the world the same way, and we had had similar experiences with people being upset because we held conservative views, me on campus and him running for the Senate in 2004. And so we decided that's where we would get started, and that's where we decided we'd work on it. And when I signed a book contract with the United States Senator, I didn't expect that he'd have much time to work on it, but Jim is just a hard-working guy, and he worked me to death on this book. That's how we got started, and our concerns were that if we lose freedom of speech, and especially if conservatives can no longer in the public square stand up for values like fidelity in marriage and against homosexuality and those kind of things, then we were going to lose our whole culture. And so that's why we wrote the book. Both of us had experiences of trying to do that and being shouted down.
Well, and those are experiences that are shared by many people in this nation. I know of it as well as a conservative radio talk show host, as a writer myself, that you're stepping into the lion's den when you want to champion conservative values, traditional values. And what are some of the main points that you guys make in this book?
Well, Paul, we start off by talking about our two experiences. Actually, Jim was running for the United States Senate when he happened to blurt out one day that he didn't think that his children in public schools should be taught by unmarried teachers living with their boyfriends who were pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And that caused quite a stir, and then he happened to say some other things. And I had previously been in some court cases speaking against gay marriage that was back before when it first got started in the 1990s. So that's how we each share those two chapters at first. And then we sort of talk about the culture wars in America. There's nothing really new in that. But really, Jim and I were putting in kind of tidbits and outrages that we were finding that were really frightening us. One of the things is the cost that all this was doing. And one of the examples we used were some cheerleaders down in Texas, some of whom were pregnant before the fall started. And actually, the incentive of liberal groups in Texas was for the girls to have abortions so they could go ahead and cheer.
Unbelievable. And
then finally, when some of them didn't, the National Organization of Women and other liberal groups came in and said, well, they still should be allowed to cheer, even though that was in defiance of local statutes that the school board had about whether or not girls could continue to cheer.
Wow.
And, of course, what happened is, and, Paul, this happens a lot, is that because they were intimidated, the school district backed down.
Mm-hmm.
And, these liberal groups can sometimes just rattle a chain, and these school districts and libraries and other things just don't have the money to fight a court case, so they don't. We spent a whole chapter on the Boy Scouts, of them standing up to having gay scoutmasters. And what we found there is that they had spent millions of dollars defending themselves to try and protect their policies. But, of course, many, especially on the left coast, public schools and public parks were put off limits for the Boy Scouts as a result of their stand.
Been a lot of wrangling to try to run them out of places and manipulations of rents. So when you look at the Boy Scouts, I mean they're a private organization, right? I mean they should be able to say who they want as members, what member categories, and without being harassed or attacked. And it's amazing when we look at such the good that they do. They do such wonderful things and have for years, and that they can be pressured and pushed to really lose their privacy, lose their ability to say who they want to have. It's amazing, and I was talking the other day, David. What your book touches on such a relevant subject. It's so pervasive.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, you're very welcome, and it's what drew me to this. And of course, if folks, you can find this book at www.whywewhisper.com. There's many places you can find Amazon, Barnes & Noble. We have it linked up for our Conscience of Kansas listeners at our master website of Superior Conservative Values at www.ibbetsonusa.com, at just about every book outlet there is. But I like the website you guys have here at www.whywewhisper.com for several reasons. One, it gives you the outlets where you can buy the book. But you guys also include some accolades from some very upstanding conservative stalwarts, including Rush Limbaugh, and who's the gold standard for all of us guys in radio. And so not only is the book being read and being endorsed by influential conservative minds, but you also have on here, which I think is very interesting, is a way to go beyond this book. And it seems to me that was one of the goals of blog, where people can share their instances of situations that have gone, to sort of speak about them, get them out, converse with others. Tell us a little bit about why you did that.
Well, we originally, I don't think we'll do it anymore, but we had originally envisioned a second volume, which is after what we identified, other people would call in and share their experiences. I mean, I'll just take one of them, the college student who wrote in and said that when she began her Western history course, a Western civilization course, the professor walked in and said, "If you believe in God, you have no right to sit in this class. You're just ignorant."
Wow.
And I mean, and those kind of things going on college campuses. Of course, most of us have been on college campuses all our lives, aren't surprised by some of that. But our book talks about the way this has seeped out, into the culture, into the fact that a city council can't open a meeting with a prayer, and the Boy Scouts, and cheerleaders and extracurricular activities in the public schools and in libraries and things like that. That's what we're talking about. And Paul, of course, there are a lot of conservatives who are alarmed by this, but we also have a lot of apathy in our country, and I think a lot of people's ears are just kind of full right now of hearing this, and they don't really realize how bad things are getting.
Well, absolutely, and that's a very good point. And you talk about moral relativism, and in your book, and this idea of moral relativism, whether you call it political correctness or whatever term it goes under, is the idea that we can no longer make judgments about anything. And that, right and wrong is simply in the eyes of the beholder. If you believe doing some atrocity is okay for you, then it's okay for everyone. And it's a responsibility. Now we're in a point, like you say, where people have almost lost track of what is right and wrong. And we're creating a generation that's going to be living something completely different than what the Founding Fathers set this country up for. And even what we've had since then. I was talking yesterday with someone, and we were talking about your book, and I was telling them, if you took someone from, say, 1950, and you pulled them away from their television set, and you rolled them in front of a television set in 2008, they would be traumatized. I think they'd have to go and get counseling. I'm talking about basic cable. What you see today, the standards we have in our culture, what kind of language is used, what kind of sexual scenes are put out there, what kind of anti-American rhetoric is thrown out there. I believe that an individual from the 50s going to today would just be awestruck. Does that seem reasonable?
Well, you're exactly right, Paul.